Here we are in AP Lit. We're about to read the poem, The Poison Tree, and maybe Courtney, could you read it for us?
I was angry with my friend. I told my laughter after it ended. I was angry with myself. I told her not to let it first. And I watered it in tears, night and morning with my tears. Now it's under the smiles and on the soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld its shine. And he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole. And the night had veiled the fold. In the morning glad I see my foe stretched beneath the tree.
Okay, so basic questions. Tell me about the person, Kinsley, who's talking, the speaker.
I said it was like a garden.
All right, what do we know about the I in the poem? Some people, again, you're tempted to answer, it's William Blake. And one way to look at that is it's never the author. I mean, in a sense, every time a teacher gets up here, we are a persona. We are this, I am this, but I'm not, this is not all that I am. It's pretty close, but it's not all. So, it's particularly true with, I think, writers. Whatever character they assume, whatever voice they use, you really shouldn't assume this is exactly the way the author is. That's just a general comment. So it's always best to say, the speaker rather than the author. But the speaker, she certainly, or he, the author is a he, certainly uses that garden thing in here. What else do you know about Kinsley, about the speaker?
He is angry with, like you said.
Yes, and we're kind of getting into. Can you tell me anything about it? Because we know what happens, but can you tell me anything about how he handles that anger?
Well, I took it as he like gave him like kind of a poison apple or something.
Either literal or figurative. Any other way that he handles the anger, Avery?
Well, I kind of understood the poem, like, it kind of seems like a parable in the Bible almost, by the way it's being told.
So that's a good point. A parable or even an allegory. Anybody want to? You know what an allegory is? Can you tell me what an allegory? Tell me what both of those are, just in case somebody doesn't know.
Well, when I was gonna say a parable, I felt like it was telling in a story form, like some sort of moral or something to live by.
Right.
And so, I guess the speaker was saying how before he had a friend and he like shared the anger with the friend and then it went away, but this time he like kept his anger inside so it grew and then he like personifies his anger as a tree and because he didn't like let it out, it became poison apples which ended up killing his enemies.
That's a good summary of one of the questions. You need to do that. What happens in the poem? So, parable or allegory. Remember, allegories are usually long, but even Jesus one time told us, and after one of the parables, and after the disciples went to him, and he said, okay, the reaper is, I remember, but the sower was with the Pharisees. The birds were the angels. He goes through about 6 things and identifies each of these things in the poem or in the parable represented something else. And that would definitely call it parable. But allegories work like that too. Everything in it. So when we said he was given a poison apple, on one level, yeah. On the literal level, that's a real apple. Somebody must have eaten it and they died. But the real meaning of this poem appears to be in the symbolic meaning. That's what really we're getting at. So that's the speaker and what he's talking about. What does this say? And I guess that's probably the dramatic context. You kind of answered that. That's the setting. So let me find our questions. Anyway, tell me what does the poem mean? What is it saying? Find my questions. Anyway, yeah.
I feel like it's implying a little bit that maybe society tends to hold things in
Because what happens when you hold, in this case, anger, what happens when you hold anger in?
It ends up getting worse than it was in the beginning, so.
Can anybody explain how the guy dies and what happened? That was a bit confusing to me. Why does the other guy, break into the garden? Now, remember, that's the imagery that ties the poem together. The structure of the poem, how would you describe the structure of the poem? And it's connected with what I was just asking. How is that? That's one of the questions. How is this poem organized? Did anybody get that before we go? Courtney had an answer to the other question, but I switched it on real fast. Yes.
Well, in the first stanza, he's kind of setting the scene with just like describing his anger, I guess. And then in the next two stanzas, his anger is growing. In the final stanza, you see the consequences of his anger, I guess. So it's
Okay.
kind of like the process of growing where you plant the seed and then watch it grow.
Right, and what does he do to help it grow? He plants it, the wrath did grow. And then he goes to the second stanza. So the poem is organized around the growing of a tree. That'd be one way to describe it. So what does he do to help it grow? Is it kind of accidental that the anger so fire?
No, it says like he waters it in his fears and he sends it with smiles. So it's something that he almost like encouraged him to do.
Right. And eventually it bears fruit. Normally you think of that as good, right? Your work is gonna eventually bear fruit, just keep at it. Not in this case, there can be bad fruit as well as good fruit. So that's kind of how it organized. We'll go back to Courtney. I think my question was, why does his enemy break into the garden? There's that imagery again. Well, I don't know what you were gonna say a minute
Well,
ago.
I was just gonna say that I think the imagery of the garden and the apple is kind of referring back to the story of Adam and Eve, where
Yep, absolutely.
it's like making the point, I guess, that, I mean, he grew this fruit and it was his anger that made it happen, but it's the enemy's fault because they were the one that sinned and took the apple, and that's eventually what caused their downfall.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're blaming, I don't mean it that way, but you know what I mean, you're pointing the finger at the other guy for discovering, somehow he discovered the anger.
I think it's more like the speaker is blaming the other guy, like, as more of like a justification for what it seems like.
That's very, very good. That's a very good way to answer that question. It's the speaker. One thing I like about that is you haven't forgotten who's speaking. You have to take everything in context of who's saying this. And sometimes we get lost. We forget. Oh yeah, but this is just the speaker's attitude. He's the one who said he stole. That's really very good. He's the one who said he stole in and done something he shouldn't have done. So he's the one blaming. I like that. Yeah.
Well, I think the poem is an allusion to the fruit of the spirit, because we think about how, a good spirit produces good fruit, but we forget that a bad spirit produces bad
Yeah.
fruit. And so we see that in action. And then in the second stanza, I think that, he's talking about how he was angry inside, but he refused to actually talk about it. And so the wrath grew as he continued to give fake smiles and pretend on conversation.
Now, does this seem reasonable to you? Mason, go ahead and say what you have.
Well, I was just thought it was interesting that, so the whole poem is sort of saying his anger is like the tree, and when the guy finally does take the fruit and dies beneath the tree doesn't go away, so he still has all this anger built up in him, even though the person it was originally targeted at is now gone, so he's gonna have to find something else to do with that, which means it's not just gonna go away with passing person even.
That's very, very interesting also. The tree is still there, the fruit is still there. So what does that tell us about, and make a general comment about anger and expressing it or holding it in or whatever? Can you take that a step further? What does that tell us about anger in general, in reality? You just said he got his anger out and it did its work, but it didn't go away. So what does that tell us about anger?
I don't really know.
Well, I thought you just said it. It would never be satisfied. It's possible that your anger is never satisfied. Just because the object of your anger went away, the anger itself didn't go away. It becomes almost a thing in itself. You think the anger is tied to what caused it. If I deal with you, I'm no longer angry. You're suggesting, or Paul might be suggesting, it's become a thing, you've created a monster. You know, the anger, it becomes something else that is not tied to the thing that caused it to be anger. Is anger always bad? Was the fruit in the garden bad? The tree of knowledge? Was that bad? Was it a poison tree? No, it was a perfectly good tree. What's the only thing that made it prohibitive, or made it, what's the word I'm looking for? Made it, you can't use it, can you? What caused that to bring death?
The fruit that it bore, the fruit that it came from.
Yeah, and simply God, that fruit, whatever it was no worse than any other fruit. No, it was, but because God said, it's God's decision that it was bad. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. Although God knew that it was probably not ready, Adam and Eve weren't ready for it, but there's nothing wrong with it. So it's God who decides what's good and bad. Not arbitrarily, it might seem that way to us. But I really think that's interesting about what you said. One of the questions, we have an answer, two of the questions. One is the tone of the poem, which is connected to the rhythm, the meter, the rhyme, and the language. This is where we don't like to go. So how would anybody, I forget what the question was, how does the language contribute to the meaning? Do the patterns of rhythm and rhyme contribute to the meaning of that? Yes.
This is a lot like what Avery said, but it seemed more like a fable or a nursery rhyme almost, just because the line ends typically on the line, like it doesn't keep going, so it's not hard to read.
It's in stop, which is simpler
Yeah.
than the other kind, right?
Yeah, and it was just easy, like A, B, E, you know, just.
I had to read it to the other class to hear that. You've already picked up on it. I'm going to exaggerate. And I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles. That's a little bit off. And with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright. Now that would be exaggerating it, but that is exactly what the rhythm is, which, as you say, is very childlike. Wow. Again, to use a childlike nursery rhyme for something as serious as this.
Maybe to just show, I don't know, I just felt like it was to mimic a nursery rhyme, so
Yeah.
that you would realize there's a lesson to be found in here or something. I don't know.
Yes, maybe there's one step we can go from that. Are you telling me that the rhythm doesn't match the meaning very well?
Like, I guess to me, also, it's kind of simple, like action and consequence, maybe?
Okay.
Or like,
But in a way, you're saying that it's such a serious topic. Somebody dies at the end, but that would be very unchildlike, right? So what is the rhythm tend to do? Which is the purpose of the rhythm?
Well, it does, it makes it seem more lighthearted, because
Which
it's something
it
that's so
isn't.
dark, yeah.
So if you were trying to make something dark seem lighthearted, what are you doing? You're deceiving somebody, right?
Well, I was gonna say it like seems like he's talking to like a child, like he's trying to
Possibly, yeah,
like soften it for a child.
yeah.
Well, I didn't think that it was deceitful necessarily. I thought that it was just a simplified version of the truth in
Right,
order to.
that's certainly a way to look at it.
To the different
Sure.
audiences. But I mean, in grammar school, we learned simplified, happier versions of things all the time because it was the rhythm and it sounded
Right.
better. Like the Ten Commandments, we sang about not killing each other and not
Right.
cheating
was simply, what do you call, what's that term, when you, a memory trick, what do you call it?
Mnemonic device,
Say it again.
mnemonic device.
Mnemonic. Okay, that's a mnemonic device. That was something sort of artificially created in order to learn it. What were you gonna say?
I think that it sort of adds to like the creepiness of it. I don't know if this,
Yeah.
because it was like an old poem, so I.
Yeah,
think
Blake,
it
William
didn't have
Blake.
the idea of like children being creepy, but it kind of feels like, you know, if you're watching a horror movie and they have like the kids like singing a song and you're like, oh, they're possessed or something, it's very scary. And then I think also, probably more likely would be it kind of is like, I mean, they had like dark nursery rhymes, like what's the
Sure.
one, the ring around the rosy one? Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one, and it's just like, like you die from the plague, but it's a kid's rhyme and they think it's a game. I think it's kind of like making light of a serious situation.
Okay, sure. Did you have anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing about Ring Around the Rosie, like it's such a dark
Yeah.
thing, kids dying,
Right?
and like kids are singing it, like the London Bridge is falling down.
Yeah.
So I just thought.
That's not a happy thing, is it?
No.
Yeah. Can I add one more suggestion? One more thing you might consider. What did the author do about with his anger toward his friend? And he smiled. And it took the friend to figure it out, so he masked his own anger. And I'm just saying one way to look at the nursery rhyme, it masks, and it's another way to say what many of you were saying, it masks the darkness, but that's why I mentioned deceitful. It's almost like his masking his anger. I hate you, but you'll never know it. And the nursery rhyme sort of masks that a little bit. It softens it, like you were just saying. The nursery rhyme softened the London Bridge and the plague. The purpose is to soften it. Well, his is too, but seems like his purpose is also deceptive, which he was toward this person. Yeah.
Well, I took the first stanza differently. This might have been what you were trying to say, but, I took it as, well, first my friend made me angry, and so I told him that he did, and then my anger subsided because we resolved it. But then when his foe did, he didn't address it, and so I thought that it was more of a comparison rather than a friend becoming a foe.
But I don't think anybody mentioned that. It could be two different people, or it could be one person, and either one works. There's not like necessarily a right, you get two for the price of one. It could be two different people, or it could be that the foe actually had been the friend. Did you notice anything about that first stanza? Again, talking about language, we talked about rhythm and meter, how that masked the purpose of the poem, in a sense. But did you notice anything about the diction in the first stanza?
Well, they specifically used angry, but they also used wrath. Like, they didn't use, I told him my anger, like, they used wrath. Like, it kind of implies a more violent,
Yeah.
hateful
Good.
than just being, like, kind of angry.
Yeah.
with them.
Well, just look at it. What stands out? Without reading it, just look at it. Yeah.
Well, every line starts with I.
Yeah. Which could be kind of boring, but it also, what would you say about somebody that used the word I, like in every sentence?
They're self-obsessed.
Right, which is another comment on the content. You know, I mean, if you're gonna nurture this anger, do you really have to nurture anger? Like when I'm angry, it's like I don't wanna be, but I just can't get it off my mind. This image keeps coming to my head and that I replay it, but I'm not doing it on purpose most of the time. But can you imagine doing that on purpose? You kind of enjoy the anger. That, talk about creepy, you know, that certainly is. So we've talked about the structure, we've talked about the language, the meter and rhythm, see how all it works together. Lastly, someone explained to me how anger itself, I know it develops into something, it produces fruit, but how can anger itself kill somebody? And I'm not, you know, I don't think it can, right? Anger has to turn to violence and so forth. So we're talking symbolically, but how can your stored up anger toward somebody, your hidden and stored up anger toward somebody, how could it kill? Sounds like it couldn't, right? Well, what if you knew that this person that smiled at you, and let's assume maybe they were at one time friends, and I don't know how long it goes on, weeks, months, years, and then you find out that for all year, all school year, did you know, the entire junior year, I found out then she hated me. She was always nice to me and never said anything, and then I found out, however I found out. It seems to me that kills something right there. Just knowing that somebody not only hated you, you know, that kid in the 6th grade who always sneered at me, that's one thing. You know what you're dealing with. But the girl or the guy that always smiled at me and actually kind of liked them, then you realize somehow it comes out, they hated your guts. I mean, that would be devastating. Even, you know, in fact, if it is a friend that became a foe, that would be even more devastating. The fact you could hide that for a year, I wish you'd slugged me like day one and we could have gotten this out of the way. Yeah.
It's like that part of that person that you thought you knew that is dead to you, so.
Did you hear that? Say that again.
Well, the person that you thought you knew, or the way you perceive that person becomes completely opposite, so they're dead to you, basically, is that what it's getting?
I like that expression because I think we've heard it. Somebody can be dead to you, and you're not without killing them personally. I remember a sermon on the 10 Commandments, and he went from murder to 6th commandment, and he said you can murder relationships. I never thought of that before, and that's informing the way I read this poem. But I never thought about, like, divorce is a murder of a relationship. You can cut people off and never talk to them again. That's something several people, I think, I've experienced that before. That people can just cut you off, it's over. And you didn't kill me, you didn't physically kill me, I'm still here, but it's as if I was dead to you. You could die. I actually know some people. I think they're still alive. I don't have proof. I don't have visible proof or audible proof, because I hadn't heard from them for what it counts the number of years or months or days or whatever. So it's like they're dead. So I know we don't have a couple of minutes, we could draw a lot of conclusions. I'll let you do that about the anger. I think this really gets to me because we've all been angry. Even Jesus got angry, we said that. But there's a righteous, rarely righteous kind of anger, and there's this kind. So what I'd like for you to do is make sure you're reading the book for tomorrow. We'll come back to the solitary reaper and the other, and good job with that.